Chapter 6. I walked from the building with a bounce in my step and crossed the busy street when the traffic stopped and the crosswalk sign changed. I pulled out my phone and dialed Zoe. "How was the audition, girl?" she asked. "I totally nailed it," I said. The director actually laughed at my jokes. I have never had an audition go so well. I feel like my luck is finally turning around. That's so great. If you weren't going out with Mr. Famous tonight, I'd say let's celebrate, but I'm pretty sure he's going to surpass anything I could come up with. How about I make you look super hot for him instead? I laughed. Go for it. 2 hours later, I stood in front of the floor-length mirror mounted on my closet door and inspected my reflection. I had on a black cocktail dress from Zoe's closet that revealed more cleavage than I normally showed. Crystal droplet earrings fell from my ears, and my hair was swept back from my face in soft curls. I pinched my cheeks and grabbed a blush palette. "Why did I have to be so pasty?" I blurted. "You're a redhead who comes from a long line of Scottish people. What do you expect?" "I wish I could be more tanned like you," I said, inspecting her golden skin. "My dad's black." "It kind of comes with the territory," she said, looking at me like I was nuts. I grinned back at her. Zoe and I had been having this conversation since we were 13. "I'm not sure about this dress," I said, adjusting the strapless push-up bra Zoe had insisted I wear. Honestly, I wasn't so sure that going on this date was the best idea. What was I supposed to do if it didn't go well? I'd have to see Carson day after day on set, and that could get awkward fast. "The dress fits you perfectly. And your boobs look amazing. You really should be more proud of your body." I am proud of my body. I'm just not so sure about showing off so much of it, that's all. The doorbell rang. I grabbed my clutch and walked across the floor in the heels Zoe had convinced me to wear. I opened the door, and Carson smiled at me. He handed me a bouquet of red roses. "Wow," I said, taking them from him. "Thank you." No one had ever gotten me flowers, unless you counted the corsage my dates got me for high school dances, which I didn't. I'd only dated one other guy seriously, Nate, my on and off again high school boyfriend. When he cheated on me with a girl on the debate team, I'd called it quits. Ever since then, I hadn't had much time for guys. I was too focused on landing auditions and honing my acting skills. I looked at the flowers and wasn't sure what to do with them. Did Carson want me to bring them along, or was I supposed to put them in a vase? "Carson, aw. You brought her flowers," Zoe said. "Want me to put them in a vase for you so you can get going, Aleyna?" Zoe asked. "Sure. Thanks," I smiled at Zoe, grateful for the rescue. When I'd snapped on my seatbelt and Carson was backing out of my driveway, he said, "I hope you're hungry. I got us reservations at this little place called Aria." I hadn't heard of it. Carson drove us to Buckhead, past the Ritz-Carlton and some of the more upscale shopping centers in Atlanta. When we walked into Aria, I fought to keep my expression neutral. I'd never been in such a nice restaurant. Everything in the room was black or white. The tables were covered with white cloths, fresh flowers, and formal place settings. Most people would need etiquette classes to know how to navigate this restaurant properly. Carson pulled out my upholstered chair, and I sat, smoothing my full skirt. The waiter appeared, and Carson ordered artesian water and a platter of hummus. "Can you have the kitchen bring vegetables with the pita bread that normally comes with the hummus?" "Absolutely, sir." "Is there anything else I can bring you?" "No. That will be all," Carson said. "You remembered," I said when the waiter returned to the kitchen. My heart began to swell within my chest. "Don't fall for him, Aleyna. He's going to break your heart." It's what players like him do. We wouldn't want you getting sick, he said with a grin that left my traitorous heart fluttering. The waiter returned with a tall glass bottle of artesian water and untwisted the lid, breaking the seal, and filled our glasses. Are you ready to order? The waiter asked. I nodded, and Carson said, yes. I'll have the creamless celery root soup and the spaghetti squash. And I'll have the yellowtail. I closed the menu and handed it back to the waiter. He left, and I took a sip. The cool water was crisp on my tongue. Refreshing, I said. This is the best water I've ever had, Carson said. He leaned back in his chair, the corners of his mouth bending up. I'm a sucker for good food. Just vegetarian food, I added. Precisely, he said, jabbing a finger at me with a crooked grin. How did your audition go? It was amazing. It's just an indie film, but still, it was fun to do something with horror. Hey. Every audition counts as acting experience. I guess that's true. I hadn't thought about it that way. Think you'll get a call back? I hope so. The director really liked me. The waiter reappeared after a few moments and brought out a basket of ciabatta bread. Carson took a slice and smeared butter across it. He took a bite and closed his eyes. Amazing. I smiled. Bread is bad news for me. Sorry. Better not try it. It's amazing, but totally not worth it. Believe me. I never cheat. I'll be sick for hours. After a few times of that, you realize bread isn't that great after all. I can imagine, Carson said. What made you want to become a vegetarian? I asked. I'm not so much into the killing animals thing. It's a matter of principle for me. I can't bring myself to do it. He took a sip from his goblet and spun the glass in his hand slowly, staring at the remaining water moving around. But that's just my personal stance. I don't judge what other people want to do. I don't judge you for eating that innocent piece of bread either, I said with a straight face. He smiled lightly. The server returned with the hummus, pita, and vegetables. I picked up a carrot and dipped it in the smooth mixture. This is delicious, I said. He picked up a chunk of pita bread and scooped up some hummus. Amazing. Right? I took a piece of celery and dipped it into the hummus. It's addicting. You know the interesting thing about this place, he said. They change their menu every night. I usually check the website to see what they're serving that night before I decide whether I want to come here. Do you eat out a lot? I asked. It depends on how much I'm working. I eat on set a lot. James is good about bringing me food. The food on set will put some weight on you if you're not careful, he said. I know what you mean. At least you don't have to eat what they give the extras. And neither do you. Not anymore. Thank goodness for that. Some sets are pretty good about letting the background workers eat with the crew. Yeah. I've worked a few shows like that as well, he admitted. Have you done a lot of background work? I nodded. I've more or less supported myself on background work for the last year. You can do that? Carson asked. It's not fun, but yes. If you know the right Facebook pages to follow and the right websites to sign up for emails from, you can get background work 4 to 5 days a week. That's a bit of a generous estimate, but I've had a few weeks like that. Carson shook his head. We're going to make sure you have steady work from here on out. I sat back in my chair, my pulse racing. Carson made it sound like we were a team. I raised a skeptical brow. How did I even know he'd be talking to me tomorrow, let alone helping me to find more work whenever my gig with Devastation ended? A few minutes later, our food arrived. It looks too pretty to eat, I said. Carson laughed. I don't even feel a little bit guilty about it. I took a bite of the fish. How is it? He asked. Light, flaky, and fresh tasting, I said. I'll have to take your word for it, he replied. I haven't had fish since I was 7. My dad took me fishing, and I ended up crying myself to sleep after realizing that I was eating the innocent fish I'd caught. A giggle bubbled up from my throat, and I attempted to hide it behind my linen napkin. Laugh all you want, he said. It was serious business to me as a 7-year-old. I believe you. It's just cute, I said. Wyatt's not a vegetarian though, is he? I asked, remembering how Wyatt had eaten meat on set. Wyatt's a total meat and potatoes kind of guy. You guys look so much alike, but you're so different at the same time. You have no idea, Carson said. You should hear us talk about politics sometime. I laughed. Let me take a wild guess. You're not the conservative one. He flashed a smile. How'd you figure that out? Lucky guess. I said. We finished the rest of our dinner and Carson paid the bill. I have a question for you, he said as we got into the car. I know you guys have Oscar, but are you more of a cat person or a dog person? Cat person, I said, impressed he'd remembered Oscar's name. You? Cat person, he said. But you have a dog, too. He's Wyatt's dog. I just take him running from time to time. Oscar is Zoe's, I said. We parked and then walked over to the Fox Theater. You have no idea how excited I am for this, I said. How excited are you for this? He asked as we stepped onto the sidewalk in front of the theater. Freaking excited. It's my favorite musical, and I haven't seen it since I was 14. Mine too. But I think most people would say Phantom is their favorite. Yes, but I'm a musical person. I did a few shows in high school. I used to write musicals when I was. I stopped mid-sentence and gasped. Several flashes popped up from beside us and Carson blocked the lights with an arm, pulling me close to him and rushing us forward. He swore under his breath and jerked open one of the heavy golden doors to the building. How'd they find me here? Had he told someone in public that he was coming here tonight? I gulped. What magazines was I going to end up in now? But the worry flew from my mind as I took in my new surroundings. It looked like we just walked into a lavish Egyptian palace. Everything was gold, ornate, and carved. The lobby was enormous with gigantic pillars lining the walls. Carson chuckled. I take it you've never been here before. He took my hand and led me across the massive lobby. You think this is amazing? Wait until we get inside the theater. He led me up the grand staircase, and I couldn't keep my eyes from roaming all over the room, my senses overwhelmed by the amazing space. Carson's eyes twinkled as he took in my sense of awe. He led me through a doorway, and I couldn't keep my eyes from widening. These are our seats? I asked. He'd led me to a private box with an excellent view of the stage. You like them? He asked. Are you kidding? These seats are amazing. His mouth turned up, and I could tell he was proud of himself. This guy didn't mess around when it came to first dates. But why me? Why go through all this for someone like me? I took the seat next to him and paged through the program he'd picked up from one of the ushers on the way to our seats. The lights dimmed, and the show began. I didn't want to miss a single moment. Occasionally, Carson leaned over, his ear brushing mine, to comment on the performance. Every time he did it, my breath caught, and my heart pounded. Just after the intermission, he took my hand and laced his fingers through mine. I wrapped my fingers around his and leaned onto his shoulder. I had no idea what cologne he was wearing, but it smelled expensive, and judging by everything else I'd noticed about him, it probably was. The more I breathed in his smell, the more I longed for him. As the show progressed, it became hard to focus on the stage. Carson stroked his thumb over the back of my hand, and I melted further into him. I was getting sucked in, and I was completely powerless to stop it. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a little voice called to me, warning me that what I was about to do was dangerous and reckless. Carson had a reputation for being a player. What if his gentlemanly behavior was just a ploy to get me to drop my boundaries so that he could get what he wanted from me only to move on to the next girl? I fully recognized the possibility. But I didn't care. Nothing mattered anymore. Not the show, not the consequences of what I was about to do. My breath picked up in ragged inhalations, and when I lifted my head from Carson's shoulder, time stopped. The show vanished away, and I lifted my eyes to his face. He turned and gazed into my eyes. I froze, staring at him, his jagged breaths touching my face. His breath smelled intoxicating, and he leaned in until just the tips of our noses were touching. We stayed like that for a moment, just breathing together, absorbing each other's presences. Then, without warning, his lips were on mine. I responded immediately, and then my hands were in his hair and his arms were around my back. I pulled him in closer, but I couldn't get close enough. The taste of him drove me wild, and I had to have more like an addict on cocaine. His tongue flicked between my lips, and I moaned. I ran my fingers through his hair, down his neck, and over his muscled arms. There was a current between us so strong I had never imagined such a thing existed. We separated, gasping for breath, but then leaned in for more. Finally, we pulled away as the lead actress on stage hit a high note. I couldn't stop smiling. I was completely hooked. After that, how could I ever have another kiss that would pass it up? I looked back at him, and he caught my eye and turned to look at me, his eyes softening. He leaned until his nose touched mine again, and he kissed me again, this time a small, sweet peck. He ran a hand down my arm and laced his fingers through mine again. I leaned my head on his shoulder and kept it there for the remainder of the show.